So recently, the Utah Jazz traded Rudy Gobert to the Minnesota Timberwolves for a lot of parts. Uh, there's Malik Beasley, Patrick Beverly, this fellow over here, this guy I forgot his name already. Uh, Jared Cunningham, and the rights to Walker Kessler. Along with all these guys, they also got 4 first-round draft picks and the rights to swap a pick. That's a lot. So a lot of people, by a lot I mean like I've seen like 2 articles or something, but we'll take that as a consensus. A lot of people say that the Jazz fleeced the Timberwolves. Did they? Well, maybe. Here's what you want to consider with this trade. One, impact players win you titles. So if Rudy Gobert is sufficiently an impact player, goes to the Timberwolves, and they win a title, they win this trade. Period. What you're after is to win a title. Unless you're the Indiana Pacers, in which case you just want to make the playoffs for 20 years, and that's okay. For most other teams, though, you really want to win the title. And therefore, you want to trade for impact players. There's only maybe 20, 30 of them tops that elevate you from being a team that's going to make the playoffs and lose to a team that can win a championship. Now, is Rudy Gobert one of those players? You could look at the past playoff performance and say no, because the Jazz had some pretty good rosters. They never made the finals. But the advanced stats on Rudy Gobert are pretty good. Talking about win shares per 48, defensive metrics. Any defensive metric that you want to look at basically matches what you will get the vibe of if you see him play, which is this guy is really good at defense. There's a reason why he's won Defensive Player of the Year a bunch of times, because he really is good at defense. He not only protects the paint against the primary big, unless that big is Nikola Jokic, but he also really dissuades people from slashing to the basket because he will block their shot. And that's really important. That's been a weird fit for Gobert going to Minnesota because that means they're going to be playing really big. You're talking about moving Towns to the 4, and the Towns is a great outside shooter, so that's okay. That doesn't mean that you have spacing issues. Towns, I think, would prefer to stay outside and shoot lots of threes. So that part works, but on defense, that's going to be a problem because Golden State will obviously run small, and that's going to force Gobert off the court because they're not going to put Towns on the bench. So you're going to have some lineups where Gobert won't be on the floor. Even the Mavericks can play Finney Smith at the 4, Christian Wood at the 5. Once again, you're forcing Gobert off the court. If you're paying a lot of money to a guy and having traded away a bunch of players and picks for a guy and he's off the floor in key situations, that's problematic. Okay, so that's the concern. He makes the defense a lot better, and against a lot of lineups, he really does improve your chances of winning. Um, but there are going to be times when it probably really won't work. On the flip side, okay, what did they give up? Or what are they getting, I guess? What are the Jazz getting? Beasley is actually kind of underrated. He's actually a pretty good scorer and a pretty good defender, so that's actually okay. Obviously, you're not getting the playoffs if you get Malik Beasley. It doesn't mean you go from a lottery team to a playoff team, but he can play pretty big minutes and be a respectable player. Patrick Beverly is almost surely going to get traded to the, some other team. I don't know who. He's going to get traded to a playoff team. Because if you're a playoff team, you want a guy who either is going to start at the point or come off the bench and play some minutes at the point. That's Patrick Beverly. He gives you an edge. A lot of teams will want that. So they'll flip him at the trade deadline to somebody else. Again, this guy, I no clue. I don't think he'll make the team. Cunningham's actually a pretty solid defender. I think that's actually an underrated pickup. He's a guy who is probably going to play a bunch of minutes this year and play solidly. And then Kessler puts up really good numbers in college in terms of blocks. He blocks a lot of shots. As a matter of fact, one of his draft comparisons was to Rudy Gobert. So now, do I think he's going to be the next Rudy Gobert? That's a long shot. But maybe. I mean, let's be real. If he's like 75% of the player that Rudy Gobert is, then he can start and play solid defense, and that's okay. So the Jazz get some guys back. Now, one of the big things that people say they got fleeced, or the Timberwolves got fleeced due to, is all these draft picks. The thing to consider with this is these probably aren't going to be high draft picks. All right, you're probably talking about mid to late first round picks. And if you get enough of them, and you don't have spectacularly awful luck, then eventually you're going to hit on a player, right? Just keep on drafting. Law of large numbers sets in. Um, Timberwolves sometimes draft well, sometimes not. So it's not exactly like you're getting the Spurs or the Grizzlies who find these guys in the mid to late first round or mid to late second round, and they turn out to be really good players. Maybe. Maybe they will, maybe they won't. But they get a bunch of shots. And ultimately, it was clear that the Jazz had to trade Rudy Gobert. And being that they didn't have that much leverage, this is actually a pretty good haul. This seems to indicate that they're going to go in a different direction, not just because they are going to have a different coach, but you're going to shift away probably from defense to more of a fast-paced offensive scheme. You're not going to make the playoffs this year, almost surely, unless Walker Kessler comes in and actually plays like Rudy Gobert. So you're rebuilding if you're the Jazz. You compete for a top draft pick in the coming year. Compete, quote unquote. You get a bunch more draft picks. Seems like a good trade. Really good trade, in fact, for the Jazz. But for the Timberwolves, if they don't win the finals, this is probably not a successful trade, right? They probably gave away a whole bunch to not success if they don't make the finals. This is a trade that you make when you're going to be making the finals. So that's the criteria. I'm not going to say they got fleeced quite yet, but if they don't make the finals, then unsuccessful trade. And the West is hard. You have a lot of good teams in the West. So we'll see. It's going to be a fun year.